Okay, let's just dive right in. I want you to, for a second, just visualize a map of North America. Unless you're driving, of course.
Please don't close your eyes if you're driving.
Right. But for everyone else, picture the East Coast, the Canadian North. What names just, jump out at you?
Well, you can't miss them, really. There's the Hudson River, slicing right past Manhattan.
A pretty big landmark.
Huge. And then you have the colossal Hudson Bay, which just dominates the map of Canada. Then, of course, the Hudson Strait, Hudson County, the Henry Hudson Bridge.
This name is everywhere. It's like it's literally carved into the bedrock of the continent.
It is. You can't navigate the geography or the history of the Western Hemisphere without tripping over his name.
But this is where the story gets incredibly strange.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's a little unsettling. The man himself.
He's a ghost.
A complete ghost.
It's one of the most profound ironies in the history of exploration. I mean, we're talking about a figure who is just monumental.
Yeah.
Geographically, commercially.
Culturally.
Absolutely. And yet, if you try to find Henry Hudson, the person, what drove him, his background, even what he looked like, he just evaporates.
We have no portrait of him. We don't really know where he was born.
And the ending of his story.
See.
It's not the typical hero returns home to a parade narrative, to put it mildly.
No, this is a mystery. It's a story about obsession. And ultimately, it's this terrifying story about a very cold, very lonely end.
It really is. It's the story of this brilliant, maybe obsessive navigator who is cast adrift by his own men.
In a tiny open boat.
In the middle of the frozen Arctic, never to be seen by Europeans again.
That image, just the sheer silence of it, has always stuck with me. So, our mission for this deep dive is to try and track down this lost navigator. We're going to look at how his obsession with the Northwest Passage, and the Northeast Passage for that matter, how it accidentally redrew the map of the world.
And we're going to have to dig into the ship logs, the court testimonies, and all the modern analysis to figure it out. Not just what he found, but maybe why he lost everything.
And we have to be really careful with those sources, right?
Yeah.
Because as we'll see, the people telling this story had a very vested interest in making Henry Hudson look bad.
Or at least, deserving of his fate.
Exactly. History is written by the survivors, even if the survivors are mutineers. So let's start at the beginning. Or I guess the lack of a beginning. You said he's a ghost. What do we actually know about Hudson before he steps onto a ship in 1607?
Almost nothing. It is genuinely bizarre. I mean, usually with figures of this magnitude, think Drake or Raleigh or Columbus, we have birth records, we have family letters, something.
Right, there's a paper trail.
There is. With Hudson, he enters the historical record in 1607 as a fully formed, middle-aged man. He's already a captain. He's already experienced.
And so he just pops into existence at age 40.
Essentially, yes. Historians speculate he was born around 1565, probably in London. There's this persistent theory that his father might have been a wealthy alderman, a founding member of the Muscovy Company.
Which would explain the connections.
It would explain a lot. But it's all circumstantial. We don't know his education. We don't know where he learned to sail.
But he must have had some serious credentials. I mean, you don't just walk up to a major trading conglomerate like the Muscovy Company and say, hey, give me a ship. I want to go sail to the North Pole.
Precisely. When he first appears, he's being hired by the Muscovy Company of London. And this was, one of the most powerful joint stock companies in the world. They wouldn't trust a novice with that kind of capital.
So what was the mission? Because this is the part of the research that really stopped me in my tracks.
Right.
The plan wasn't just go explore north.
No, it was much more specific and, frankly, scientifically wild.
They wanted to sail right over the top of the world.
Yes. The goal was to reach Cathay, China, and the Spice Islands by sailing directly across the North Pole.
Now, to a modern listener, that sounds insane. We know the North Pole is, or at least it was, a permanent ice cap. Why on earth did a group of wealthy, educated London merchants think you could sail a wooden ship across it?
Well, this is where we have to kind of get into the headspace of 17th century science. They weren't stupid. They just had a different understanding of physics.
Okay.
There was a prevailing theory, championed by cartographers like Robert Thorne, that the Arctic was only frozen at the edges.
Like a ring of ice.
Exactly. And the logic was based on the midnight sun. They knew that during the Arctic summer, the sun doesn't set for months. It's shining 24 hours a day.
Right.
So they theorized that this constant solar energy would generate enough heat to melt the ice at the high latitudes.
So they thought if you could just punch through that outer rim of ice, you'd sail into a warm, maybe even tropical polar sea.
That was the dream. A polinia, an open polar sea. They believed the constant friction of the ocean currents and the relentless sun would keep the top of the world open. And you can see why it was so seductive.
Oh, absolutely. A direct route to China, shaving off thousands of
The
miles.
straight line north. It would change the world economy overnight.
It's a beautiful theory. Logically sound, if you just ignore thermodynamics.
Right. So Hudson buys into this. He takes a ship, the Hopewell.
Which was not a large vessel.
Oh, tiny. About 80 tons. He takes a crew of 10 men and 1 boy, his own son, John.
And on May 1st, 1607, they set sail to test this open polar sea theory.
They head straight for the ice. They reach the coast of Greenland in mid-May. And this is where we start to see Hudson the explorer at work. He's meticulous. He's mapping. He's naming things.
He names a Young's Cape and a Mount of God's Mercy.
Mount of God's Mercy sounds like the name you come up with when you're already in serious trouble.
It really does. It implies they were navigating through some pretty dangerous waters.
For sure. They pushed further north, reaching what they called Newland, which we now know as Spitzbergen or Svalbard. Yeah. They made it incredibly far north. He even named a spot Hold with Hope.
Hold with Hope. Wow. The names alone really tell the psychological story of the crew.
They do, and they managed to reach roughly 80 degrees north latitude. Hudson himself estimated they went even higher, maybe 82 degrees.
Which was probably a bit of an exaggeration.
Modern analysis suggests he was slightly off, due to the primitive instruments. But it doesn't matter. Getting an 80-ton wooden boat to 80 degrees north is an incredible feat of seamanship.
You have to imagine the conditions. Fog, shifting pack ice, the rigging freezing solid.
It's terrifying. But the theory, the big, beautiful theory, was just wrong.
Completely wrong.
As they pushed north, the ice didn't thin out. It got thicker. They finally hit the polar ice pack. There was no warm sea. There was just a wall of white.
So the mission to cross the pole is a failure. But this voyage isn't a total loss, is it? Because in his logs, Hudson mentions something else, something he saw in the water.
Yes. While he's dodging all these icebergs, he notes that the waters around Spitzbergen are teeming with whales. Great numbers of whales is how he puts it in the log.
And that one little sentence basically launches an economic gold rush.
It does. Hudson didn't find spices, but he found oil. His report, and the credit is sometimes debated between him and another explorer, a guy named Jonas Poole, but his report effectively kickstarts the Arctic whaling industry. Within a few years, the Dutch, the English, the French, the Spanish, they're all swarming those waters. They nearly hunt the bowhead whale to extinction in that region.
It's the law of unintended consequences. He goes looking for a shortcut to silk and spices, and instead he lights up the street lamps of London with whale oil.
Exactly. And that brings us to the end of the 1607 voyage. He returns to England, having failed to find the passage, but having proven he could navigate the ice better than almost anyone else alive at the time.
Which buys him another shot. So 1608, he's back in the same ship, the Hopewell.
Right. And the Muscovy Company is still backing him, but they've kind of cooled on the whole North Pole idea.
I'd imagine so. The over-the-top theory is busted.
So they pivot.
They pivot to the Northeast Passage. The idea is to sail east, over the top of Scandinavia and Russia, and then come down into the Pacific that way.
Which, spoiler alert, is also incredibly difficult.
It's the Northern Sea route. Even today, with nuclear icebreakers, it's not exactly a leisure cruise.
And in a wooden sailing ship. It was brutal. Hudson made it to Novaya Zemlya, which is a long archipelago in the Arctic Ocean, just north of Russia. But just like the year before, they hit the ice.
I feel like a pattern is emerging here. Hudson is a very capable technical sailor. He gets the ship to the very edge of the known world, but he keeps running into the physical reality that the world is much, much colder than the investors in London think it is.
The ice always wins in this era. He tried everything. He tried to ram the ice. He tried to sail along the edge of it. But by July, it was clear. There was no way through. He had to turn back.
Now, there's a weird footnote about this 1608 voyage. You see it in some older history books. This claim that Hudson discovered Jan Mayen Island.
Right. You'll see references to a place called Hudson's Touches. But this is almost certainly a myth.
Why do you say that?
Well, if you actually plot his course from the 1608 logs, hitting Jan Mayen would have required a massive, completely illogical detour that he just didn't have time for. Plus, his own journal doesn't mention it at all.
So it's just people wanting to credit him with everything they could.
I think so. He was becoming a celebrity explorer. It's like how every witty quote gets attributed to Mark Twain or Winston Churchill. Every island in the north got attributed to Hudson for a while.
So 1608's another bust. He comes back to London. And The Muscovy Company, I'm guessing they're done, right? They've spent a lot of money for 2 trips that went nowhere.
They lose faith. They basically tell him, look, Henry, you're a great sailor, but this just isn't working. They cut his funding.
But Hudson isn't the kind of guy who just retires to a cottage. He's obsessed. And this leads to what I think is the most fascinating pivot in his career, the 1609 voyage.
The rogue voyage.
Exactly. Because he doesn't sail for England this time.
No. He crosses the channel, he goes to the rivals, he gets hired by the VOC, the Dutch East India Company.
And we really need to contextualize the VOC for a second. This isn't just a company. This is like Google, Amazon, and the U.S. Navy all rolled into one.
They were the first global megacorporation. They had their own army, their own currency, the power to wage war, and they were in a fierce trade war with England.
So for Hudson, an Englishman, to go work for them.
It was borderline treasonous. It certainly wasn't looked upon kindly back in London.
But the Dutch hire him. They give him a new ship, the famous Half-Moon, the Half Moon. And what are his orders?
This is critical. His contract was very, very specific. The VOC directors in Amsterdam were conservative. They told him, try the Northeast Passage again.
Go back to the place where you just failed last time.
Essentially, yes. Go back to Novaya Zemlya. Try to find the route over Russia.
Okay.
So Hudson sets off in April 1609. He gets near the North Cape of Norway, and surprise, surprise, he hits ice. Heavy storms. The crew, which was a mix of Dutch and English sailors who couldn't even understand each other, they start getting mutinous.
So most captains in this situation have 2 choices. Go home and face the music, or keep banging their head against the ice.
But Hudson takes option C.
He goes rogue.
He commits what is essentially grand larceny and corporate disobedience. He ignores his orders. He proposes a new plan to the crew. He turns the Half Moon around, but instead of heading back to Amsterdam, he points the ship west.
Across the Atlantic.
Right.
Towards North America.
He just decides to freelance. He had been corresponding with his friend, Captain John Smith. Yes, the John Smith from Jamestown.
No way.
Yes. And Smith had sent him a map and some rumors that there was a passage through the North American continent somewhere around 40 degrees latitude.
So he bets his life, his crew, and a stolen Dutch ship on a rumor from John Smith.
It was a massive gamble. If he found the passage to Asia, the Dutch would forgive him. He'd be a hero. If he failed, well, he'd be a mutineer who stole a company asset.
So they cross the Atlantic, they reach the Grand Banks of Newfoundland in July. And this is where we need to talk about Hudson's leadership style, especially with the indigenous people they meet, because the logs paint a pretty disturbing picture.
They do, and it often gets glossed over in the heroic explorer narrative. They land near what is now Le Havre in Nova Scotia to repair a broken mast.
Right.
The indigenous people there, likely the Micmac, were actually quite accustomed to Europeans. They had been trading with French fishermen for decades, so they came out to the ship ready to trade beaver pelts.
So this wasn't a hostile first contact. It was a business opportunity.
It started that way. But Hudson's crew was on edge. And on July 25th, the log records a really shocking escalation. Hudson's mate writes that they took the ship's boat, loaded it with 12 men armed with muskets and a murderer.
Which is type of small cannon, right?
A small cannon, yes. And they went ashore, they assaulted the village, drove the people into the woods, and stole their boat and all their goods.
That is just straight up piracy. Why? Why did they do that?
The log is vague. It suggests they feared the natives were stealing from them, but the response is so disproportionate. It really shows that Hudson either had very little control over his men or he condoned this kind of violence.
And that lack of discipline, that's going to come back to haunt him.
Big time. So they loot the village and they flee south. They cruise down the coast past Cape Cod all the way to the Chesapeake Bay, and then they turn back north, looking for this magical passage Smith told him about.
And on September 3rd, 1609, they find it. A massive break in the coastline, a huge river estuary.
The Hudson.
The Hudson.
Now, he wasn't the first European to see it. Verrazano spotted it in 1524, but Hudson is the one who actually sails into it, and you can see why he got so excited.
Oh, yeah. The river is wide, the water's salty, the tides are strong.
Well, it looks like a strait. It looks like the way to the Pacific.
But again, the violence follows them. Just days after arriving, they have a skirmish with the Lenape people.
Yes, a small boat crew was returning to the Half Moon when they were attacked. A sailor named John Coleman was shot in the neck with an arrow and died.
Which should have been assigned to maybe, leave.
You'd think, but Hudson presses on. And strangely, the relations with the local people fluctuate wildly. One day they are shooting at each other. The next day, Hudson is going ashore, drinking with the chiefs, trading knives for oysters and beans.
It sounds completely chaotic.
Yeah.
But they keep sailing upriver, past Manhattan, past the Palisades, all the way up to where Albany is today.
And this is the heartbreak moment of the 1609 voyage. As they sail north, the river starts to narrow. The water, which was salty at Manhattan, turns brackish, and then it turns fresh.
And fresh water means?
It means it's a river. It's draining a continent, not cutting through it. It's a dead end.
Wow, imagine the mood on that ship. They've risked everything, crossed an ocean, fought battles, sailed 150 miles inland, only to realize they were in Albany, not China.
It must have been crushing. On September 23rd, they turn around. Hudson has failed to find the passage again.
But, this is the key for the listener, even though he considered it a failure, this voyage changed the world.
Absolutely. Hudson noted the rich land, the timber, and most importantly, the furs, the beaver pelts. When the Dutch finally got his logs, they didn't care about the route to China anymore.
They saw a commercial empire.
Exactly. Because of Hudson's failure, we get New Netherland, we get New Amsterdam, and eventually we get New York City.
History is so weird. He fails to do what he wanted, but he accidentally founds the capital of the modern world.
It's failing up on a geopolitical scale.
So he sails back. But he doesn't go back to Amsterdam, does he?
No, and this is a bit suspicious. He lands in Dartmouth, England. Some historians think the English sailors on the crew forced him to land there. Others think Hudson was just done with the Dutch. Either way, the English authorities immediately detain him.
They ground him.
They say, "You are an Englishman. You should not be sailing for foreign powers." They forbade him from leaving the country.
But his maps and logs still made their way back to the Dutch.
They did, which secured their claim. But now Hudson is back in London, and the English merchants, the Virginia Company, the British East India Company, they look at his logs and they think, okay, he failed, but he found something interesting.
They're ready to roll the dice one more time.
And this sets the stage for the final act, the fatal journey of 1610. They give him a ship, the Discovery.
The Discovery. It's a small ship, right?
Very small, about 55 tons. And he assembles a crew. But this crew, there are some bad apples in the barrel right from day one.
Who are the key players we need to know about?
Well, there's Robert Jewett, the elderly mate who had been with him on the Half Moon. He was cynical, bitter, and had already shown signs of being insubordinate.
Okay.
And then there's Henry Green.
Green is a character straight out of a Dickens novel.
He was a young man from a good family, but he was a bit of a scoundrel. Hudson apparently knew his family or had taken pity on him. Green wasn't a sailor. He was more of a clerk or a guest on the ship.
And Hudson protected him.
He did. Gave him a good bunk, treated him almost like a son, which makes his eventual betrayal even more hideous.
So they sail in April 1610. They head northwest. They round the tip of Greenland and enter the furious waters of what we now call the Hudson Strait.
And this is a nightmare stretch of water.
Yeah.
It's narrow, the currents are violent, and it's just choked with ice. Most captains would have turned back.
But not Hudson.
Hudson forced the Discovery through. He was absolutely relentless.
And then the breakthrough.
On August 2nd, the ship bursts out of the strait and into this vast open body of water. To the west, the horizon is just water.
They must have thought, this is it, the Pacific Ocean.
They were ecstatic. They turned south, sailing into this massive inland sea. They spent months exploring the eastern shore, expecting to find palm trees or a route to Japan any day.
But it wasn't the Pacific. It was Hudson Bay, a giant cul-de-sac.
The biggest dead end in the world. And as they sailed south into what's now James Bay, the days got shorter, the temperature just plummeted, they were running out of time.
And in November, the trap snapped shut.
The ice formed around the ship. They were frozen in. They had to haul the Discovery onto the shore or risk it being crushed by the ice. They were stranded in the Canadian subarctic for the winter.
We have to talk about the psychology of this. It's dark for months. It's 40 degrees below zero. They're living in a wooden hut covered in moss. What happens to the minds of these men?
It turns toxic. Scurvy sets in, their teeth are falling out, their joints are swelling, they're running out of food, and they start to blame Hudson for everything.
And Hudson doesn't handle it well.
No. He hoards some of the food, he accuses men of stealing, he demotes his loyal officers and promotes the troublemakers. He just completely loses control and splits the crew into factions.
And loses the room.
Completely. And as spring finally approaches, the big question becomes, what do we do when the ice melts and the crew just wants to survive? They want to go home.
We ardently desired to return, as the record says.
But Hudson is still chasing the ghost. He still believes that if they just sail a little further west, they'll find the passage. He starts talking about restocking supplies and continuing the search.
And for the crew, that's a death sentence.
It is. They look at this man who has led them into this frozen hell, and they decide he is going to kill every last one of them if they don't stop him.
So, June 1611. The ice breaks up, the ship is afloat again, and the whispers start.
The plot is hatched by Henry Green, the young man Hudson had saved from the streets, and Robert Jewett, the bitter old mate.
The betrayal. How did it actually go down?
It was early in the morning. Hudson comes out of his cabin, and the mutineers grab him immediately. They bind his arms behind his back.
Did anyone try to fight for him?
A few did. The ship's carpenter, a man named Philip Staff, is the real hero of this story. He wasn't on the mutineers' list to be marooned, but he looked at them and basically said, "I'd rather go down with the captain than live with you lot."
Wow.
He voluntarily got into the boat with Hudson.
That is just incredible integrity. So they lower the small open boat into the water.
And they throw in Hudson, they throw in his teenage son, John, and then they throw in the sick men, the ones suffering from scurvy who were useless to the crew. A truly brutal move.
What did they give them? I mean, do they just toss them out there with nothing at all?
It was a weirdly specific inventory. Prickett, the survivor who wrote the only journal we have, says they gave them a fowling piece, like a shotgun, some powder, and shot, a few pikes, and an iron pot.
The iron pot. That detail always gets me. It's such a domestic, mundane object. Like, here, you can boil some water while you freeze to death.
It's a gesture that feels like it's born from guilt. See? We aren't murdering you, we're giving you a chance. But it was murder.
So the Discovery pulls up its anchor, and the shallop is in the water.
And this is the most chilling part of the entire account. The men in the shallop, they start rowing. They try to keep up with the big ship. They are literally chasing their only hope of survival.
But the mutineers don't wait.
No. They unfurl the topsails. The Discovery catches the wind and just pulls away. Prickett writes that they watched the shallop until it was just a speck on the horizon, and then it was gone.
And that is the last time Henry Hudson was ever seen by a European.
Silence just returns to the bay.
Okay, now we need to put on our detective hats. Because everything we just described, the mutiny, the items in the boat, that final chase, it all comes from one main source.
A back of Prickett's journal.
And Prickett is not an unbiased observer.
Not even close. He's a guy who is trying to save his own neck.
Right. You have to remember the legal context here. Mutiny is a capital offense. In England, you hang for it.
So when the Discovery finally limped back to London crewed by just a handful of starving skeletons, they knew they were walking into a trial for their lives.
So Prickett writes a journal that conveniently blames everything on the two guys who are already dead.
It's the perfect defense. Oh, it was Henry Green and Robert Jewett. They were the ringleaders. They forced us to do it.
And where were Green and Jewett?
Dead. Green was killed in a fight with Inuit further north on the journey home. And Jewett died of starvation just days before they reached Ireland.
How convenient.
Incredibly convenient. The ringleaders are dead, so the survivors can all say, we were just innocent bystanders.
And it worked. They were put on trial, but no one was ever executed for the mutiny.
No one.
Why? Was it just a lack of evidence?
Partly. But frankly, the London merchants were pragmatic. These men had just been to the Hudson Bay. They knew the route. They knew where the furs were.
Executing them would mean losing that intellectual property.
Right.
They were too valuable to hang.
It's cynical, but it's practical. But this leaves us with the big question. Prickett says they left them and they just vanished. But are there other clues? Clues that the story didn't end right there in the bay?
There are. And this is where we get into the realm of speculation, but it's fascinating. There is the captive stone.
Tell me about this stone.
It was found in the 1950s by a road crew near Deep River, Ontario, which is about 600 kilometers south of where Hudson was marooned.
That's a long way.
It's a huge distance, and it's this massive slab of rock with crude carvings on it.
What does it say?
It has the initials HH, year 1612, and the single word captive.
1612. That's a full year after the mutiny.
And captive suggests he wasn't free. Now, I have to be the skepticism police here.
Of course.
The authenticity of this stone is heavily, heavily debated. The Geological Survey of Canada analyzed it, and while the weathering looks consistent with age, there's no way to carbon date a chisel mark. It could be a very elaborate hoax.
But if it's real...
If it's real, it implies Hudson, or at least someone from that boat, survived the winter, traveled hundreds of miles south down the river systems, and was being held by a local tribe.
It paints a picture of a desperate struggle for survival that lasted much longer than we think.
And there's another source, isn't there? One that's maybe even more compelling.
The Inuit oral history.
Yes. This is, to me, just incredible. In the 1990s, a researcher named Dorothy Harley Eber interviewed Inuit elders in the region, and they shared stories that had been passed down for nearly 400 years.
What was the story they told?
They spoke of a small boat arriving with strange men, and specifically, they describe an old man with a long white beard and a young boy.
That has to be Hudson and his son, John.
The description is uncanny. The Inuit had never seen white men before. The story goes that the men were starving. The Inuit took them in, they fed them.
So they didn't die immediately on the water?
According to this oral history, no. But the ending. It's tragic in a whole different way. The story says the old man eventually died of illness or exhaustion. And the boy. What happened to the boy?
The Inuit adopted him, but they were afraid he would try to run away and die in the snow.
So what did they do?
The story says they tethered him to the lodge, like a pet or a precious object they didn't want to lose.
That's haunting. A teenage English boy, alone at the end of the world, tied to a post while his father lies dead nearby.
It's a heartbreaking image, and while we can't prove it 100%, it aligns with the timeline and the location better than any other theory we have.
What a heavy legacy. The man appears from absolutely nowhere, and he disappears into the snow, leaving only these faint, tragic echoes.
And a map.
Right. Let's zoom out for the takeaway. Hudson failed, right? By every metric his employer set for him, he was a disaster. He lost ships, he alienated crews, he never found the passage to Asia.
A perfect record of failure. And yet, he is arguably one of the most consequential explorers of the millennium.
Because he opened the door.
His failure in New York created the Dutch foothold that became the economic engine of America. His failure in the North opened up Hudson Bay, which led directly to the Hudson's Bay Company.
And that company dominated the fur trade for 2 centuries and effectively drew the borders of modern Canada.
He was the ultimate disruptor. He broke everything he touched, but the pieces landed in a way that built the modern world.
He died searching for a shortcut, completely unaware that his name would be immortalized on the maps of 2 nations. He wanted to find China. Instead, he found New York and Canada. I want to leave the listener with that final image. The Discovery sailing away, the sails filling with wind, the distance growing between the big ship and that tiny, tiny shallop.
And the question of what was said in those final moments.
If Prickett was lying to save his own neck, if the True didn't just sail away cleanly, what really happened on that deck? Was there a fight? Did Hudson beg?
Or did he just sit there, stern and silent, watching his command, his son, and his entire world disappear over the horizon?
That is the secret the ice keeps.
Indeed.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. This has been The Deep Dive. Catch you on the next one.